Welcome to everybody, members, pets as well. My name is Michael Newman. I'm the Chief Exec of the AJR, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this very special event this afternoon. And as well as our members and their pets, it's very nice to see some colleagues who have joined us today, some of whom haven't seen for a while, and we hope that everybody is well. And I hope for those of you who haven't been in contact that the last few weeks and months, especially during lockdown, have been manageable. For those of you who are more familiar with the AJR, which I assume is most of you, you will know, of course, that our primary role is the provision of social welfare services. And through the e-newsletter that we're now circulating, you can see a whole range of things and activities that we're doing from the social side as a way of staying in touch with people. But of course, our primary role is to make sure that our members are safe and secure and have any welfare needs attended to. So if you are aware of anybody who could benefit from our core services, then please do let us know through the colleagues who are in touch here, on the call here, or through contacting the AJR office. And I say office because I am sitting in our offices. We are planning to make a return in the next few days, coming weeks, as we are with our other core services, our social work and volunteer visits. So I can't say we're returning to normal because I'm not even sure what that is anymore, but we are slowly getting back to what we are here to do. And one of the things that we've been delighted to do over the course of during the lockdown is to start and then expand our Zoom events. And we really have a very special first today. We have a first time, I think we've done an AJR event involving colleagues at AJR, one interviewing the other, talking about a very specific subject. And it's really a great pleasure. I'm delighted to share with you that I will be in conversation with my colleague Debra Barnes today, who is the author of The Young Survivors. And here is a copy of the book. This is what's called an uncorrected proof version, which I got sent a few weeks ago. So I can't show you I'm sure Deborah's got. Yes, we should put up copies of the ones that you can now buy, which was published last Thursday.
Yeah.
And it's there are other, in the history of the AJR, other colleagues, other members of staff have written books. But for you, for your achievement, it is wonderful achievement, a wonderful success. So first of all, I should start with saying congratulations on the publication of your debut novel, your first novel. And also thank you for inviting me to a new experience last week, which was my first ever socially distanced book launch, words I've never had to say before, which was really great, and to meet some other people who have helped you get through the process. So perhaps we should start with you giving maybe a brief summary or synopsis of the book, and then we can get into a bit more around the subject, the content.
Okay, lovely. Well, thank you very much, Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, this is a proper copy, as it were. Not the proof, this is the actual copy. And as Michael said, it was only published last Thursday, so it's highly unlikely that anybody has had the chance to read it yet, although some people have read it very quickly. So this is a novel about a Jewish family in France during World War II. It's a different take on a Holocaust novel because it's written through the eyes of 3 children, or as my publisher puts it, it's written in the most difficult way possible. So I've written it in the first person through the eyes of 3 very different characters. I'm not too sure why I chose to do it that way, but it seems to have worked well, so I'm pleased I did. And people are really enjoying the different aspect that gives it. So it's the story of a Jewish family, as I said, and It's their life from 1938 onwards. So it looks at how their life was before the war. It looks at what happened to the family at the beginning of the war. And then in 1942, when the parents are arrested and deported, it looks at the life of the 5 children who are left to fend for themselves after their parents are taken. The children range in ages from when the parents are arrested, the children are between 17 and 4 years old. So they have a range of very different experiences depending on their ages. And the eldest child, for example, the responsibility of the care of the family is suddenly thrown upon him, and he's left with these huge responsibilities of deciding what to do with his younger siblings. They want to keep the family together, but in the end it's not possible, and he has to make some choices, and he is tormented with the not knowing if he's made the right decisions. Excuse me. The middle son goes on an adventure. He doesn't have to make these decisions. Oh, excuse me, hold on. So he's kind of sent from school to school, and some he escapes from and he runs away and things, and he has a pretty much of an adventure, whereas the youngest children are infants, and so we see the world through their innocent eyes. They don't realize what's going on. They hardly remember their parents at all, and they so that's another interesting view of a Jewish family during the war. And I don't really know if I should tell you more because they will be spoilers, but the reviews that are coming through are saying that it's difficult to put it down because people really want to know what happens to the children, and you keep turning the pages because of that. So yeah, so that's really what the book is about.
That's certainly my reflection, my abiding memory of the book is that when you finish a chapter on one of the children and it moves to one of the other 2, you want to get through that as quickly as possible to get back to the original one, but it carries on and so on. So you're constantly weaving in and out these 3 narratives. And although they are younger people, their ages are such that it's a very different experience. So actually you've managed to write it in 3 different ages, in your head or in character of 3 different ages. Is that a fair description, do you think?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it was tricky, and I did doubt myself when halfway through I was writing. I thought, actually, is this sensible? What am I doing to myself? Why am I putting myself through this? But it seems to have worked. But yeah, that's absolutely what I did. So the eldest, for example, 17 in 1942. So I just thought, what would a 17-year-old boy be thinking about? Girls, maybe wanted a girlfriend, to help him get through what he was going through. The youngest were 4, and all they were interested in was playing. So, stuff like that.
But there's obviously another angle as to why you wrote this book. So can you talk a bit about how the book came about and maybe your direct connection, let's say?
Absolutely. So I am a 2nd generation survivor myself, and this book was very much inspired by what my mother went through as a young child. So my mother was born in 1938 in Metz in France, near the German border, and she lost her parents and 2 siblings at Auschwitz, but she was not sent there herself. And again, I won't tell you why, because it will be a spoiler in the book. Mum was very young, obviously, during the war, and she really didn't remember what happened. So there was nothing for her to tell us. We growing up, I knew that she had been a Holocaust survivor, but I didn't really know what had happened. And we didn't talk about it, as many families don't. It was a subject to be avoided so as not to upset my mum. And that's how we grew up. I guess that all changed in 2006. So in 2006, my mother was reunited with a woman called Denise Holstein, who, at 10 years older than my mum, had been a monitor in the orphanage where my mum was and had looked after her in 1943 and 44. So my mum was 6 and Denise was 16 at the time. Denise, and I've got a copy here, wrote a book. Sorry, I don't know if you can see it. It's in French, so people see looking at the screen. And it's called, in translated into English, it's called "I Will Never Forget My Children of Auschwitz." And on the front cover is a photo of Denise herself with a group of children. And one of those children is my mother. And someone recognized, a cousin recognized my mother in the photo. And we got in touch with Denise, who lives in the south of France. And my mum went to see her, was reunited after 60 years with this woman. And it was incredible. It was obviously very emotional. I get emotional when I think about it now. And Denise was able to tell my mum something about what life was like in the orphanage, and how the children were treated. And I can say it was positive. She said that they were young children. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know any different. They played, and they were safe until they weren't safe anymore. So Denise thought that all of the children in this photograph had died at Auschwitz, but my mother hadn't.
So Denise, at that moment of that reunion, was filling in your mother's own memories.
Absolutely.
About her life in her formative years.
Yeah, I think my mum definitely did want to remember, but she just honestly, she said that the only thing she remembered was taking Holy Communion, because for the last year of the war, well, after the war, she was hidden by nuns in a convent, and she took Holy Communion, and that's all she remembered from the war.
But by that point, of course, she was that little bit older.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something to play with it. Maybe that comes into effect as well.
Yeah.
But you had this reunion with Denise, and that sparked the initial interest, but then that's still a long way from achieving the book. So
yeah, I just felt that kind of opened a door and gave me permission to start asking more questions and doing more research. That was, as I said, in 2006. Now, sadly, tragically, Mum died in 2010, and then it was about 2013 that I took redundancy from the job I was doing at the time, and I had some time, and I thought I would do some more research into find out what happened to her. I went to visit Denise myself, and she was able to answer some of my questions. Then I started to write a blog. I wrote some articles for the Jewish News as well. And through those articles and the blogs, people started contacting me who were either in the same areas at the same time, and they could give me some information as well. Someone who contacted me is a gentleman by the name of André Converse, and he's a Jewish historian in France. Specifically in Louveciennes, which is where the orphanage is that my mother was in. And he invited me to visit Louveciennes, and he took me to see the orphanages, and he introduced me to other people. He introduced me to the daughter of the man who was the director of the orphanage before the Nazis ousted him. I met a woman called Laurence Fitoussi, and her mother had been in the orphanage with my mum, but her brother had managed to get her out, and her brother was Andre, see if I get this right, Schwarzbart, who turned out to be a prize-winning novelist, writing about the Holocaust as well. So, and all these people were able to give me more information, which, you know, helped my research. Plus, I was in the place where she was, so that helped me when I was writing the book, imagine what it was like for a child in an orphanage.
Yeah. And so we come to one of, there are many paradoxes, but in a way, I'm wondering whether this novel could only have been written at such a sufficiently distant time from the experiences. And it's because if it had been attempted to be written in, say, the 50s or 60s, there wouldn't have been, maybe the survivors weren't ready to talk about it, and their audience wasn't there. But now you've got both of those things in place. I mean, there are many, we've done so many Zoom events with authors recently.
Well, Michael, I couldn't have written it in the 50s because I wasn't born yet.
Well, you couldn't have, of course. Or the 70s or the 80s, we're being so young.
Still would have been a bit of a push in the 70s. I'm not that old. But yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, I think, okay, so until in 2010, which is the year my mum died, but just before, I was invited to join a book club. And I said to the people, I would love to join. I must tell you, I don't read books about the Holocaust. I don't watch films about the Holocaust. I don't go to talks. I just don't do the Holocaust. And now, look, 10 years later, look at me.
Yes.
I literally do everything about the Holocaust. And it's fascinating and it's so important to do so. But I wasn't ready before. You know, on the one hand, I'm so sad that my mum can't read this book, but on the other hand, I don't think I would have written it if she was still alive. It would have been too difficult. You know,
yeah.
It's a very emotional subject, and when you're so close, so yeah.
And one of the, I mean, you talked about the way, we talked earlier about the way the book was written from the narrative, which perspectives, but there are clearly specific themes that come through, and separation is obviously a key one. Community, family, parents, and so on. But there's also this kind of this fate, and when you talk of providence, when you talk to a lot of survivors, you say, well, how did you survive? And a lot of people say, well, it's luck. So is that something which, I'm just wondering if any of these themes came through from growing up with a parent who was second gen? Was there no talk of these subjects at all, or did this come through in any way?
I mean, I knew that my mum was a twin, and that her twin sister hadn't survived, and she had. And it was luck. It was luck and the kindness of strangers that allowed my mum to survive when her twin sister hadn't. So, so absolutely, yeah. I mean, that was often something that was very, you know, made very aware to us growing up. We always thought about that. Regarding you know, also when I talk to our members and everything, so there's almost always one or more lucky instances that happened which allowed them to survive, because it was only luck or the kindness of strangers which allowed people to survive. For my mum, for example, the luck was that she wasn't in the orphanage when the Nazis came and arrested all the children, and also that she was handed over to the nuns in the convent who hid her for a year. I mean, these were all just luck.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. So.
And also, you touched on there being second generation, and we should add that you have two main roles at the AJR. It's the My Story books, which are the production publication of life stories of individual members. So there's obviously a sympathetica there with this producing your own novel, and also developing our second generation work, and what was supposed to be in April just past a big gathering of second generation, an international event, a forum that we'd planned for many months. But being second generation yourself, how do you see it? I mean, lots of other second gen talk about this kind of duality of having burden and responsibility, and especially with the first generation, in your case, first generation passing away. How do you see your own role here?
I mean, I think I'm lucky because I studied journalism and I'm keen on writing, and so I was able to write this book. Other people are able to stand up and tell their parents' story. But yeah, I mean, I think I certainly don't think it's that every second generation person should feel responsible for telling their parents' story. But if you are someone who wants to take on that responsibility, then please do it. Don't see it as a burden. You should see it as a privilege, as I don't want to say responsibility. I just feel that it's something that I'm willing to do, that I don't wake up thinking, oh, I've got to do this. Do you know what I mean? It's so important to do, and I feel that I'm able to do it because I was able to write the book. So it's has been, as I say, a bittersweet experience, but such an important one that, given the opportunity to do something similar, I would definitely do it.
Yeah. And as a medium for expressing, I suppose, your own thoughts about being second generation, how much does the psychology behind it come into the book? The psychology of being second generation, or was it more the opportunity to tell one family's story?
I mean, so I didn't. So the people in this book are characters. When I was writing it, they are characters. It's fairly obvious that one of the characters is very closely inspired by my mother. But when I was writing it, I couldn't allow myself to think of the close connection that I had, because I wouldn't have been able to write. I would have just been in tears the whole time. So I tried to take on the writing of the book through the eyes of an author. And you have to do what you need to do to be able to get through this. It shouldn't be a punishment, or something that's going to really upset me every time I sat down to cry or sat down to write. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's very difficult. I need to sort of take myself out and think, no, they're just characters. I'm just writing this story, and that's it, really. That's the way that I got through it.
And how much did you know about the role of France, collaboration as France, before you started to write? I mean, you talk about Metz, and obviously the proximity to the border is significant, but the fate of France during the war, the collaboration, the resistance, how much were you aware of beforehand, or was it something you had to
I knew very little, but then, as I said, I didn't really read up or watch things about the Holocaust before 10 years ago. But yeah, no, I read very little, and when I talk to other people, I don't think it's something that's particularly well known. I mean, everybody knows about Germany and Poland and the camps and everything, but how much do people know about the fate of Jewish families in France? And as we know, it wasn't until 1995 that Jacques Chirac, as president of France, admitted the responsibility of the French government in collaborating with the Nazis. And as we know, the railways made them buy tickets to take them from Drancy to Auschwitz, and so many other horrific examples of how they collaborated. But likewise, they were also French people who helped Jews when they didn't have to, and we have to be thankful for them.
Yeah, and I suppose it's the prosecution of people like Barbie and Maurice Papon that helped raise awareness, bring into public consciousness what happened in countries outside of Germany and Austria and Poland. But that notwithstanding, he expressed his an apology. So we're going back, 25 years ago. So that's still 50 years till the end of the war.
It's 35 years. No, it was 25. Sorry, carry on.
25, yeah. You tested my math. Yeah. So do you now follow closely post-Holocaust affairs in France as to how the Holocaust is memorialized there and how the subject is taught, for example? Is that something that's become an interest?
Well, I know that Denise Holstein, who I spoke about, who wrote the book, she was going around speaking in schools when she was able. And I've been to the Shoah Memorial in Paris and to Louvre-Sienne and seen, there are lots of, too many, but necessary plaques outside schools and what were children's homes and orphanages, the children who were, and the people who were deported. I've been to Metz, where my mother was born, although I don't think there's any particular Holocaust memorial there. I know what's going on in France because it's hit the headlines so much in the last few years, the whole anti-Semitism, situation. Yeah. Oh, and also when we went to Metz, we went to visit a Jewish school, which was in the synagogue that my family belonged to. And there were armed guards outside the school. And that's commonplace all over France. My youngest daughter goes to a Jewish school here, and there are, thank goodness, not the need for armed guards. But that was very shocking, I have to say. And also we can see how many French Jews are now moving to London and Israel, leaving France. In fact, one of the ladies that I made contact with, Laurence, who was the daughter of the girl who was kidnapped out of the orphanage, when all the anti-Semitism was going on about 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote her and I said, "Oh my goodness, it's so awful there. What's happening? Are you okay?" And she wrote back and said, "Well, yes, but it's awful what's happening in London as well. Are you okay?" So I think it always seems, that is bad, but it always seems worse when you hear it on the news or whatever. So,
but do you think there's something there was a reason why it took Chirac or the French government 50 years to acknowledge the role?
I don't know enough about French politics. I don't know, it was the party that was in and whatever. I mean, I know about Pétain, who led the Vichy government and everything, but I really don't know. Actually, I don't know what.
Let me also ask you. Touched on anti-Semitism there, and as somebody who manages some of our social media, we have come off Twitter for today and the next, whatever it is, 36, 24 hours because of the protest against the rapper Wiley. And so I was thinking of a way of trying to join the fact that you've written this book, which is further educational resource to combat anti-Semitism. And here we are as an organization promoting the importance of Holocaust education. There must be a point where you think the book itself is a resource in combating that. I mean, is educational value. It's written from the perspective of children, so it must have an audience, must be those youngsters, must be those 11 or 14-year-olds or 17-year-olds.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. I mean, I would absolutely love to see it being read in schools. And that it wasn't my intention to write a book which was particularly suitable for children, but then on the other hand, I made sure that there was nothing in it that children would be unsuitable for children. So no, absolutely. And also to write it as a novel, as I said, the middle son goes on these adventures, and there is a little bit of humour in it as well. And you know, no, the children don't go to the camps; they're in France the whole time. So I think it is suitable for a younger audience, and I really hope that by writing it in the style of an engaging novel, like where a page turner, as you say, to find out what happened to each child, that that it will have a lesson to teach, while at the same time being an engaging novel. So one of the novels that I read when I started reading Holocaust novels was The Lost Wife by an author called Alison Richman. And it was the first Holocaust story that I read that was written as a really engaging novel. I mean, it was a beautiful love story, but it was set in, well, they were in Terezin, and it was heartbreaking the way she wrote it. But, you know, so I kind of didn't want to carry on reading it, but I couldn't stop because I had to find out what happened, and it was really lovely. And I thought, yes, that's how to write a story that's going to really get a message across, because people will remember it and they'll make sure they finish it, and they will recommend it to others, because it's a great book, but it's also teaching about the Holocaust. So that's kind of what I set out to do. Yeah.
Well, there's definitely, as far as I can see, and given the way the perspective on which the book is written, there's definitely an appeal for younger audience as well, who might also be being introduced to the subject. You don't go into the depravity and the gruesomeness of the camps, for example. It's more that's in the background. You're aware of that as a reader and the threat of that. But it is very much based on the, as you say, the experience. You talk about humour. There's also a bit of romance, of course.
A little bit.
Yeah. Just to, I suppose, make it palatable for those different audiences.
Yeah.
And we talked also a little earlier about the fate of the people in there. I think this won't be a spoiler, but the family that is in Metz had come from Poland.
Yeah.
And so how do you see your own sort of identity now? Because of course, part of the story of the fate is that the older person is questioned about his Polish nationality in the book. Your mum was then born in France, and then you're born in Britain. We're going through this tumultuous time as identity anyway. So how do you see, where do you put yourself? How do you see your own identity?
And my daughter was born in Spain, and my husband spent most of his life in Israel. Okay. So I mean, I don't know, I know, I had my DNA tested, and and I'm 1% Inuit, so
okay.
So I see myself as a person of the world, to be honest, but 97% Ashkenazi, and I've got the blood disorder to prove it. I mean, listen, I don't know, I do very much see myself as someone who is, I mean, I feel very British, but I do realise that my mother was born in France, and and I'm a person of the world, shall we say. No, I mean, I haven't considered getting a French passport, I have to say.
You haven't?
I haven't. No. But maybe I should. I don't know, should I?
Well, I don't think there's it's interesting. We did an event on that a couple of weeks ago, and
It was.
it's quite a big one. I'm not sure there's a right, because it's just very clearly a very subjective thing. In the end, I suppose it's also bringing up these feelings of, with the questions about identity, with it being a subject for discussion, means to me that conversation has reopened. Whereas if I go back a generation or two, it was just not something people talked about. Yes, some people made Aliyah, but being settled in Britain was, I think, the fate of most people here. We just felt it was fine. It wasn't even talked about. Now, with the breakup with Britain, with Brexit, with uncertainty, people feel a bit more somehow less settled. I don't know. That's just the feeling I get.
Yeah, I don't know.
We're going off on tangents here. Just coming back to the book, we talked a bit about the genre, the Holocaust genre, and the time frame here, because we're talking about 75 years this year, anniversary, and it seems to be a more growing popular genre of books anyway, the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a future proofing, Holocaust education aspect to all of this. Do you see, I'm just thinking, why do you think this so popular a subject at the moment? I mean, why is it? Because the time since the end of the war that makes the subject so popular?
I think it's part of it is definitely that people realise that the survivors themselves, the people who could give their testimony firsthand, we're losing them. So now is sort of the best time, if you haven't done it already. I think because when I was doing my research, probably the most important part of my research was going to the south of France to speak to Denise Holstein, who looked after my mother, and she was able to tell me face to face, what had happened. And those opportunities just aren't going to be around for much longer. So for me, it's definitely a question of timing. I wasn't ready, like I said, I certainly wasn't ready in the 50s, but I wasn't ready before to write this book for various reasons. Plus the fact that now I'm, been at AJR for 3.5 years, and I know a lot of people in this community. So it's really actually very good timing for me. So I don't know, there have been a lot of books, I know, they talk about the this of Auschwitz and that of Auschwitz, and the tattooist and the librarian, and I don't know, I can't. They have their merits, some of them less, some of them more. I'm not going to, for me, some great books, as I said, The Lost Wife. I enjoy the books about France, but there haven't been that many. The Nightingale, for example, by Kristen Hanna, was a great book, a great novel, and it taught us something as well about France. So that's what I'm enjoying.
I'm conscious of the time. I do want to give our members, our audience, a chance if they want to ask questions as well. But just for now, the last question from me. It's been interesting as colleagues to watch you go through this whole writing and editorial process, and we've obviously spoken about this as it was happening. How do you feel now, if you think back to how you felt going into it and how you feel now? Obviously, there's probably a relief that you've done it. But how do you feel? I guess, how do you feel now about this, having achieved this? And
I don't know, it doesn't seem real, because I was working on it for such a long time. I have to say the book was about 95% finished when I joined AJR 3.5 years ago. And then I started working on my story, and I just thought, no, this is more important. And I put the book to one side. But I think deep down, I knew that as a debut writer, it was easier for me to tell people, oh yes, I'm writing a book. And many people who are watching will have heard me say that. I'm writing, but it's not quite finished yet, rather than saying, I've written a book and no, I don't have a publisher or an agent or whatever. But in the end, I sat down and I finished it, and I got an agent and I got a publisher. And then the launch was delayed because of coronavirus. And I thought, oh, it's never going to happen and whatever. And it happened. So I'm absolutely delighted.
Yeah.
I'm just enjoying this this moment. And the reviews, as I said, have been absolutely incredible. I'm really thrilled. And obviously it's only like 3 or 4 days since it was being published, but yeah, it's really good. So I'm very happy.
Good. Now, I did see earlier there was one question which came on the chat. Let me see if I can just bring that up. This is from Cynthia. Were there specific children Deborah met or knew about whose experiences served as inspiration for the narrative? Well, I think we've covered that point now, because we know who the protagonists in the story are inspired by, let's say. But let's see if there are, maybe Susan,
Michael,
you can
I've
help
got
me.
a couple of questions coming by chat.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so, well, one again, which you've answered, which is that the book is basically fiction, but based on a great deal of facts. I think we've answered that. And another question, Deborah said that writing the story as a novel made the telling more bearable. But it'd be interesting to know what else writing a novel rather than a biography enabled her to do.
Yeah, I mean, it enabled me to fill in the gaps, really, because, you know, when I was researching my mother's life in France, because she didn't remember things and because all of the children were separated, there was no one to ask. Obviously, there are lots and lots of documents available, and I have hundreds and hundreds of documents about where she was, but there were still gaps that needed filling in, and so writing it as a novel allowed me to fill in those gaps, obviously doing research and making sure that everything did happen, but maybe didn't necessarily happen to my mum. So that's really what the writing it as a novel allowed me to do.
If I just read out a couple of questions, there's actually quite a few coming in now. So a question about how did your mother recover her Judaism and also come to England. But there's also a couple of questions saying that are you planning on another novel? So I wondered if that was going to be the theme of your next novel.
Okay, well, we'll talk about, so my mum, although she only remembered taking Holy Communion, I don't think she ever thought of herself as Catholic. That was never an option. So she didn't have to rediscover her Judaism. She was actually, so in hold on, I've written the date, so in 1945, her name was discovered on a list from the Red Cross. And actually, I literally got sent a copy of this list last week through the Wiener Holocaust Library, which is amazing because I thought I had everything. But there is still more information coming out these days. So if you are, to anyone who is researching, just keep looking and keep asking, because there is a lot of more information coming out all the time. So I was able to find the list with the name of a children's home where my mum was at the end of the war. So obviously the nuns must have passed her back. She was then in a camp for displaced children for 2 years until they made contact with a cousin of hers in Cannons Park who wanted to adopt her. So she was adopted by her cousin. So as we say, her cousin became her mother and her aunt became her grandmother. and that was it. So she was, that's how she came to be in England. I don't know if I'm going to write another book. It was very difficult. But I might do. I mean, I've met so many lovely AJR members with fantastic stories, and they've really inspired me. And I know we've written my story books, but I've learned so much that I think there definitely could be another book in there, in me.
Somebody's asked, has Denise read your book and her thoughts?
Denise, okay, so her English is okay. I did send her a copy, and she was delighted with it, but I'm not sure if she read the whole thing, to be honest. I did actually put little post-it notes in the bits where which I thought she had to read. So, and I'm in touch with her grandson, who speaks better English. So I'm going to be sending her a copy of the book, and I really hope that it's translated into French. The publishers tell me that they've had interest from Germany and China. So
yes.
Okay.
Somebody's actually asked if your mother spoke French to you. Are you bilingual?
No, Mum never spoke French. No. She considered getting some sort of hypnotherapy to help her remember. I think she really did want to remember to speak French, how to speak it, but she spoke petit pois. No, petit peu, not petit pois. Petit peu. No, you wouldn't have known she was brought up in French. So she was 9 when she came to the UK. Yeah, and she didn't have any accent or anything.
Okay. So I'm being bombarded with questions here, so I feel like I'm bombarding you now. How did the gender of the young people you wrote about influence how you told their story? Were there differences in the experience of boys and girls?
Well, so there were 5 siblings, and the 3 eldest were boys, and then there was quite a big gap, and the 2 youngest were girls. The book starts in 1938 on the day that the twin girls are born. So it was really more their age that made them different rather than their gender, because in the children's home, just looking at the photo here, there were Mum was in a group with 9 children, and there was only 1 boy. But I don't think that was for any particular reason. There were boys. One of her brothers was there as well, who was a bit older. So yeah, the main difference was the age.
Okay, and I've had a couple of questions along the same lines of, when you started the book, did you know how it was going to pan out, or was it a work in progress as to what sort of detail you put into it and how it would finish?
No, I mean, it was a real process. As I tell my volunteers for my story, write a timeline, which is what I did. I followed my own process. I wrote a timeline, and then I just, it really depended on the information that I could get. If I heard a story or was told something that I thought I could write in, then I did. So that's really how I did it. I have to say my publisher was amazing, because he really helped me knock it into shape as well, because being a debut novelist, I didn't have much experience of writing a novel, and he really helped, told me about the cliffhangers so that people wanted to carry on reading and stuff like that. So the more commercial side, if you like, I definitely had a lot of help. I felt like I'd done a course in creative writing just from his notes, which was wonderful. So yeah, so that really helped.
I haven't got any more questions on chat, but if anyone wants to actually ask Debra a direct question, if you're on video, if you just give a little wave, I'm quite happy to unmute anyone who wants to ask a question, or you can unmute yourselves. I can't see. I can see. Okay, Cynthia. I'm asking Cynthia. I'm
Okay.
asking to unmute.
Cynthia is one of my volunteers, and
Okay,
she's in America, and
Ah.
we've never spoken in person. So where is she? Come on,
Right.
Cynthia.
Oh,
Come on
that's
up.
Cynthia. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Oh,
So
hello.
Deborah, hi, nice to meet you finally. And Mazal Tov, really
Thank
Mazal
you.
Tov on your milestone. It's huge. So I wanted you to please indulge the audience on this side of the pond and let us know what's happening with your book here.
Well, at the moment, it is available as an ebook, so on Kindle and Kobo and those sorts of platforms. And my publisher is speaking to American publishers, so that's all we know. I guess they're waiting to see what the response is in England before, I think, coronavirus and probably elections and whatever else they've got going on in riots in America. I don't think that's helping the industry. So I hope so. I hope it will be published out there. I'm sure there's a big audience.
For sure, thank you.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Anyone else, if you want to give a little wave, I have to. Is that
There's one
Vera?
one from Rosalind.
Oh, I've got a Vera Schaufeld's waving as well. So Vera, I'm going to unmute you, and then we'll go to. Should we go to Rosalind after that? Can you unmute Vera?
Sure. Speak.
No.
Speak.
No. Vera, can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm not.
Hi, Vera. Hi.
To give a very personal question, do you have children? And would this be of interest to your own children?
I do. I have two lovely daughters, and they've both read it, and they were both very interested in it. So I think anybody, first or second generation, will probably identify with not wanting to burden your children with these stories, not wanting to feel like you're forcing it on them. And again, I thought, so my intention of writing it like a novel, I hope that helped my daughters learn about the subject without feeling that it was a history lesson.
How old are your daughters, if I may ask?
16 and 27.
Right. I was just thinking that, it might be very suitable for teenage children to learn about maybe their family history in a very non-threatening way.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, that was my intention. Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Rosalind Joseph.
Thank you. Wasn't it unusual for the children not to be deported with the parents?
Well, I don't know. I mean, all I know is that so what happened to my family is that they dissected the families piece by piece. So first of all, they took my grandfather, then they came back and they took my grandmother. I don't want to tell you what happened. So it's in the story, but eventually the children were left. And towards the end of the war, there were orphanages and children's homes full of children, Jewish children, whose parents had been deported. Now, last week was the 76th anniversary of the roundup of the children's homes in Paris. So that's what happened to my mother's sister, where the orphanage that they were in. They came up and they rounded up, they took away all the children, they took them to Drancy and then straight to the gas chambers in Auschwitz on the infamously known convoy number 77, which was the last convoy to leave Drancy for Auschwitz. It was full of children, and it was just weeks before the liberation of Paris. Yeah.
And only a few weeks prior to that, of course, were the D-Day landings.
Yeah. So, it was a very, very, very tragic part of the story. Yeah.
Jackie Hobson, I believe, wants to ask a question.
Okay.
So let's go. Is that right, Jackie? I've asked you to unmute. You'll have to bear with us because there's we have got an enormous audience, and for us, we're going backwards and forwards across the screen. I can see others of you waving, and we will get to you. Jackie.
Right, I'm sorry my chat message was rather garbled because I was thinking as I wrote it down, but thank you very much, Deborah. I did read the prequel and found it very engaging.
Oh, good.
What struck me was when you were talking was that you said you had to think of them, the people in the book, as just characters. So I'm interested in how difficult you found it. I mean, part of your motivation was presumably to imagine your way into your mother's experience. So was that a very painful thing to do? So you stepped back by saying they're characters in a story.
I mean, once I spoke to Denise and she told me that the girls were fine, the children were fine, they didn't know what was going on, they didn't ask for their mother, they didn't suffer. That made me feel better.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very, very difficult. It was very difficult. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Shari.
I just wanted to thank you, Deborah. I think that was fascinating, very, very interesting. And I wanted to ask also whether your mother had any hang-ups, particularly having lost a twin, because sometimes you hear that children who've lost their twin brother or sister, they suffer from that. They suffer from losing something.
Yeah.
They feel lost. I wanted to ask you about that.
How long have we got? No, clearly, obviously, you know, it must have been an incredible trauma, and that was probably, you know, played part of the reason why she didn't remember anything. We don't know what the burden that my mother carried. You know, she kept it in, and I'm sure it must have been very, very painful. Yeah, definitely.
Even at the end, did she not speak about it? Even right at the end? No?
No.
Uh-huh.
No. I have to say, Mum was, she was in a hospice, and they came to see us, and they said someone, I don't know who it is, like somebody who goes around to talk to the patients, and would you like to talk about your life? And she said, no. Didn't talk about it.
Right.
Yeah. Very sad.
I look forward to reading it. Thank you very much
you.
indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shari. I think, Michael, probably time for just one more question.
Sure.
I'm just looking across. Francoise, I'm sorry, I saw you waving before, Francois. I've just asked you to unmute. There we go. Hi.
You. That was really, really interesting. I'm a first generation survivor, and part of my babyhood before we got to England was in France. I would very much like to know the French title of I Will Never Forget My Children from Auschwitz.
Okay, are you ready for my French accent?
Yeah, because I want to write that down. I want to get it.
Je ne vous oublierai jamais, not jamais, that's Spanish, jamais.
Je vais, was it je vais?
Je ne vous oublierai jamais mes enfants d'Auschwitz.
Thank you very much.
Denise Holstein.
Yeah.
Francois, if you have any problem, if you email me, Deborah and I can email you back with maybe a link or something.
Yes.
Yeah, my accent is terrible, I'm sorry.
Michael, back to you.
Well, we did promise that this was an event of firsts, and hearing Deborah speak in French, I think, comes into that category. Congratulations for that. And really, really, from the AJR, massive, massive congratulations. Mazel tov. It really is an excellent read. And I know that obviously there's a personal tribute in there as well, which clearly comes into it. But as far as for an educational read and educational resource adding to the body of knowledge out there, it's a wonderful addition. So many congratulations. And thank you for everything else that you do for the AJR as well, because obviously all these things are connected. So congratulations. And you see, I think the nature of the questions today and the number of people in the audience, how much support there is for you, and the membership's feeling towards you for having produced the book. So many, many congratulations. And thank you, Susan, as well, for co-hosting today, and other colleagues who are on the call as well, and to all of you who have been joining us and participating. As ever, we look forward to seeing you at one of our numerous events. Those of you who are receiving the newsletter, you'll see the content is growing week by week, and the varied things that we're able to organise for you. So do join us for one of those, or one or more of those events, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. So thank you very much, everybody. See you all again soon. Keep well. Bye for now.